4. It's one of my favorite events. We tend to call everything a story, and it is, but it's really happened. And this is a message that I did preach out the nursing home. So if Stan and Karen want to go home, that's fine, because they've already heard it. But this is, I called this a man, a woman, and a well. And an interesting thing that didn't dawn on me earlier, but Jesus speaks to this lost adulteress as many verses as he speaks to Nicodemus chapter earlier. That's kind of interesting. And we think, and I'll probably say it in here, I mean, Jesus came to his brethren, the Jews, but here he is in front of a Gentile. I think that God just enjoys throwing a stick in the spokes, and we think it's this way. And he says, I'll show you. I mean, he did that with Rahab. He did it with Ruth, the Moabitess, when he just came to the Jews, and he said, I'll show you. I'll do it like I want. I'm running this show. Okay, I'm going to start in verse 1 and go over a lot of verses here, but just a few comments. Excuse my allergies have really been acting up. I better get a thing of water here. Verse 1, when therefore the Lord knew how the Pharisees had heard that Jesus made and baptized more disciples than John, though Jesus himself baptized not, but his disciples, he left Judea and departed again into Galilee. He must needs go through Samaria. Then cometh he to a city of Samaria, which is called Sychar, near to a parcel of ground that Jacob gave to his son. Now Jacob's well was there. Jesus, therefore, being wearied with his journey, sat thus on the well, and it was about the 6th hour. First thing we notice is that Jesus didn't baptize anybody. His disciples did, but he didn't. And even Paul says in 1 Corinthians, I thank God that I baptized none of you but Crispus and Gaius, and I baptized also the household of Stephanas. But then he says in the next verse, Christ sent me not to baptize, but to preach the gospel. And when I was out at the nursing home one time and I covered chapter 3, where Jesus is speaking to Nicodemus, and you get to the part where it says that you must be born of water and of the Spirit, the first thing I had to say was, there is no baptism in this verse. Because as soon as some people hear water, they automatically think you got to be baptized to be saved. And that's certainly not the case. But another thing, first of all, gospel is not in baptism. Baptism is after the gospel. And you notice in verse 3 and 4, what's it say? I'll turn my page there. And he left Judea and departed again to Galilee. He must needs go through Samaria. Turn to Acts chapter 1. And verse 8. Acts chapter 1 and verse 8. I'll be there in a game. This is just practice. And Jesus is talking. It's all red letters if you have a red letter edition. But ye shall receive power after that the Holy Ghost is come upon you, and ye shall be witnesses unto me both in Jerusalem and in all Judea and in Samaria and unto the uttermost parts of the earth. The same direction that he later sends his disciples, his apostles, to witness to the earth, to the rest of the earth, he himself goes here. Just a little side note. I haven't dug deep enough into that to see if there's, what significance that might be, but it's definitely the exact same direction through the same places. In verse 3, he said, you shall be witnesses unto me both in Jerusalem and all Judea and in Samaria and to the uttermost parts of the earth. Another thing, Jacob had bought some land in verse 5. Then he comes to a city of Samaria, which is called Sychar, near unto the parcel of ground that Jacob gave unto his son Joseph. That's back in Genesis 33:19. And we'll talk a little bit about this later. Also, when Jesus comes to Jacob's well, he's tired and thirsty. What did he do? He sat on the well. He did not sit beside the well. He didn't pull up a rock. He didn't pull up a chair. He sat on the well. He's the source of the water that the Samaritan woman would need. In verse 7 through 12, it says, There cometh a woman of Samaria to draw water. Jesus saith unto her, Give me to drink. For his disciples were gone away unto the city to buy meat. Then saith the woman of Samaria unto him, How is it that thou, being a Jew, askest drink of me, which am a woman of Samaria? For the Jews have no dealings with the Samaritans. Jesus answered and said unto her, If thou knewest the gift of God, and who it is that saith to thee, Give me to drink, thou wouldst have asked of him, and he would have given thee living water. And the woman said unto him, Sir, thou hast nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. From whence hast thou that living water? Art thou greater than our father Jacob, who gave us this well, and drank thereof himself, and his children, and his cattle? This is why he must needs go to Samaria. I'll do a little thing on the word must later, but in other words, that means he had to go. He had to go to Samaria. He had a reason, and the woman was that reason. This Samaritan woman came to get water, literal water, H2O water, the kind you and I drink. I don't know if it's as good as Hamilton water, but it was been around for a long time. Jesus interrupted. She says she comes to Samaria to draw water, and he interrupts her and says, "Give me to drink." And just as a side note again, only 2 times in the gospel that Jesus asked for water. Once here and once when he's on the cross. And the Bible doesn't record that he received it either time. Because he didn't come to get, in this case, he didn't come to get water. He came to give living water. On the cross, he didn't come to get that water. He came to give his blood shed for us. So both times he didn't come to get, even though he asked, he came to give. And so she rightly says, the Jews have no dealings with Samaritans. Why is he even talking to her? And that's in Acts 10:28. I didn't mark that, but that's what Peter's talking about. And he said unto them, Ye know how that it is an unlawful thing for a man that is a Jew to keep company or to come unto one of another nation. But God has showed me that I should not call any man common or unclean. It was basically a law. They weren't to have anything to do with the Samaritans. The Samaritans were a mixed race of Jews and Gentiles. But more than that, they were mixed in their worship and idolatry. So the Jews were not supposed to have anything to do with them. And they didn't. That's another reason why she goes, What are you doing talking to me? You guys don't talk to us. So, because the Samaritans were of a mixed Jewish and Gentile blood, but very importantly tainted by paganism, the Jews considered them pigs and dogs. That's us. I'm telling you, as far as they're concerned, I know Jewish people, and I don't know if any of them would actually say it to my face, but that's what they at least believe back here. They looked, because God and the oracles of God came to them, and we were outcasts. So she was taken aback that Jesus would even speak to her, let alone ask her for water, because a Jew would not even want a Samaritan to touch his water. But remember, I'm trying to get rid of this throat lozenge. I'm telling you, I'm coughing like crazy. Here we go. I'll just chew it up. Excuse me. But remember, he must needs go through Samaria. He had a job to do. He had to go. That's what it said. So this Jew speaking to her is different than all the others who wouldn't give her the time of day. And in verse 10, he says, If thou knewest the gift of God, and who it was that saith unto thee, Give me to drink, thou would have asked of him, and he would have given thee living water. I think maybe her interest is a little piqued, or she could be mocking him with her next statement, but I don't think that a Samaritan woman would mock a Jewish man. That's my opinion based upon history there. She states the obvious that he has no bucket with which to draw, but she says that he has no bucket. She doesn't say that he has no bucket with to draw water. She says, you have no bucket with which to draw the living water. So I'm thinking her interest is piqued a little bit there. But in verse 12, she reverts back to the same thing that a lot of unsaved people do when you witness to them. What's she say? She appeals to her religious heritage. Are you greater than Jacob, who gave us the well that you're sitting on? Let's turn to Genesis chapter 32, passage that you all know. In verse 24, we'll read 24 to 30. And Jacob was left alone, and there wrestled a man with him until the breaking of the day. And when he saw that he prevailed not against him, he touched the hollow of his thigh, and the hollow of Jacob's thigh was out of joint as he wrestled with him. And he said, let me go, for the day breaketh. And he said, I will not let thee go, except thou bless me. And he said unto him, what is thy name? And he said, Jacob. And he said, thy name shall no more be called Jacob, but Israel. For as a prince thou hast power with God and with men, and hast prevailed. And Jacob asked him and said, tell me, I pray thee, thy name. And he said, wherefore is it that thou dost ask my name? And he blessed him there. And Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, for I have seen God face to face, and my life is preserved. So Jacob fought with the pre-incarnate vision of pre-incarnate Jesus Christ there, called a Christophany or a theophany, and all those other big words. And Jesus beat him. So when she says, art thou greater than Jacob, who gave us this well? The answer is yes. He already whipped him once. I mean, I'm using my language, but yeah, he's greater than Jacob that gave him the well. Verse 13, if you drink from Jacob's well here, you're going to thirst again. You know, we have to keep drinking water to sustain our bodies. We all do. With the exception of coffee, I know you appreciate this, Emma. I drink water for most every other meal. I drink pop a little bit now and then. Of course, I have milk in my Cheerios. Water makes them soggy. But I drink water. I love water, and we do, like we've said here, we do have the best tasting water in the world. There's a contest every 2 years for the best tasting water from a municipal water source, and the final one, it's regional, and this final one is in France somewhere, and we've won that several times. So when people say, who has the best water? We do. It's proven. In fact, I even put that on Facebook the other day. But we have to have water. So she was there for water, but he's there to give a different kind of water. Jesus is sitting on a, picture this for a minute. Jesus is sitting there on a well with no bucket with which to reach down to the deep well. Yet here he is telling her that he has the living water that will quench her thirst forever. And that isn't all. My water shall be in you, a water of life springing up eternally. Now that's kind of hard for her to imagine. What's he mean by that? If somebody told you that, you wouldn't, know what he's talking about, I guess. Again, consider this. He's sitting here. They're sitting at this well that has been supplying water for more than 1,769 years. That well was on the land when Jacob gave that to Joseph. When Jacob bought the land, the well was already there. I didn't write down that reference. I should have. But so that's it. That water, that's as close as eternal water that she knows anything about. That well has been supplying Israel for 1,800 years. So she doesn't know what he's talking about, but generations, 1,000 years, they've been coming to get water from that well. So that's how long Jacob owned the land, but the well was there before he bought it. So the Samaritan woman had a real knowledge of at least what a long-lasting water supply was. Now Jesus was saying that if you drink this living water, it'll be in you, springing up unto everlasting life. That's longer than Jacob's well. I mean, we read history books. I cannot imagine what 1,800 years really is. I read it and I take it as fact. Christ lived 2,000 years ago. Okay, but my mind doesn't really fathom what 2,000 real years is. I mean, I'm 70 years old, and sometimes I can't even believe that. But so 1,800 years, this well has been supplying Israel. In verse 15, I think this is where she really starts understanding what Jesus is talking about. The woman saith unto him, verse 14, but whosoever drinketh of the water that I shall give him shall never thirst, but the water that I shall give him shall be in him a well of water springing up into eternal life. The woman saith unto him, Sir, give me this water, that I thirst not, neither come hither to draw. So I believe she's getting it here. She understands just who she's talking to, maybe not completely, but I think it's here where she believes when she says, Sir, give me this living water. She can't get this living water anywhere else. Nobody else in her life has ever offered it to her. And he must have convinced her. There must have been something different about this Jew that would talk to her when no other Jew would. And he had something to offer her when she had come there just to get water. In verse 16, I'll read a few verses. Jesus saith unto her, Go call thy husband, and come hither. And the woman answered and said, I have no husband. And Jesus said unto her, Thou hast well said, I have no husband. For thou hast had 5 husbands, and he whom thou now hast is not thy husband. And in that saidst thou truly. And the woman said unto him, Sir, I perceive thou art a prophet. So in verse 16, he tells her to go get her husband when he knew she had no husband. Then Jesus lays, in 17, 18, he lays her life bare by telling her that the man she's living with is not her husband, and she's had 5 husbands before this guy. And she knows that only a prophet would know these things. In verse 20, it says, Our fathers worshipped in this mountain, and ye say that in Jerusalem is the place to worship, where men ought to worship. And Jesus saith unto her, Woman, believe me, that the hour comes when ye shall neither in this mountain nor yet at Jerusalem worship the Father. Ye worship, ye know not what. We know what we worship, for salvation is of the Jews. But the hour cometh, and now is, when true worshipers shall worship the Father in spirit and in truth, for the Father seeketh such to worship him. God is a spirit, and they that worship him must worship him in spirit and truth. Now in verse 20, she's just received a whole lot of truth. But what about those differences between the Samaritans and the Jews? We worship in this mountain here, and we have for centuries, and you Jews say that Jerusalem's the place to worship. Except for the living water, she has been only thinking of the physical realm. In verse 21 and 20 to 24, she says, Jesus tells her that salvation is of the Jews, but worship will no longer be a physical act or duty. Those religious rituals, lighting candles, doing sacrifices, are out the window. It won't be on the mountain or at Jerusalem. True worshipers will worship him in spirit and in truth. That is what God is looking for. He's a spirit. And if you're not worshiping him in spirit and in truth, it doesn't count. You've heard somebody say, preachers, I preached a message and I don't think it got higher than that ceiling. But you know what? All the religious claptrap that I just, listed there, it doesn't even make it to the ceiling. God's not interested in that. And I can say, just divert a little bit. We come in here 3 times a week, and we sing them songs, we pray them prayers, and we listen to that preacher, it can be out of habit after a while. That's what our flesh does. I mean, how many decades have you sung them same hymns? Is it really in spirit and truth? We all better think about that. He said you must worship him in spirit and in truth. You must worship him that way. In Acts 4:12 it says, neither is there salvation in any other, for there is none other name under heaven given among men whereby we must be saved. And I belabored that point. The word must means imperative. Have to. That's it. He says if you're going to worship God, it must be in spirit and in truth. He doesn't accept it any other way. You get saved, it must be that by Jesus Christ. If you're going to be saved, it must be through the blood of Jesus Christ. If you're going to worship God, it must be in spirit and truth. Verse 25, the woman saith unto him, I know that the Messiah cometh, which is called Christ, and when he is come, he will tell us all things. And Jesus saith unto her, I that speak to thee am he. So in verse, she knows their races were mixed, their religions were mixed, but I think that she must be just a little bit more Jewish in her religion, because she knows when Messiah comes, he's going to tell us all things. And down here later, it even repeats that. Perhaps this woman was, what I said, in practice, more Jewish than pagan Gentile. She knows that Jacob had the right mountain to worship on, but this verse is what Jesus is going to use to use through her to reach others. She knows that when Messiah cometh, he's called Christ, and he'll tell us all things. Then Jesus tells her that he's the guy. He says, I'm he. Whenever you see those two words, and they're not together there, where it says, I am he, but he goes, I that speaketh unto thee am he. Jews, whenever they see those two words, I am, they know something's going on here. Even though Jews don't believe that Jesus Christ is the Messiah, they know that God told Moses, when Moses said, who should I say sent me? He said, you tell him I am sent you. I am that I am. And he basically was saying that right there. Verse 28. Let me see, 27. The disciples came and marveled. Then came his disciples and marveled that he talked with the woman. Yet no man said, what seekest thou? Or why talkest thou to her? I think that the disciples were not always the most spiritual guys. Kind of like us. We think of Peter, but usually, like when they brought the little kids to Jesus, they said, hey, we're busy here. And Jesus said, you suffer little kids, come to me. But here, I think that this was so important, what Jesus Christ was doing with this Gentile woman, this Samaritan woman, that God just kind of zipped their lips. That's just my opinion. Because normally they would have said something like that. So the whole reason, I said, my opinion is that God zipped their lips, saying that there's more important stuff going on here than your useless dribble. And I think that that's the case. Maybe I should have just read that the first time. But in verse 28, the woman then left her water pot and went her way into the city and saith unto the men, come see a man which told me all things that I ever did. Is this not the Christ? So the whole reason for this woman coming to the well was to get water. Here she just leaves her pot and runs to tell the men of the city. And the men of the city implies the important guys that sit at the gate. They conduct all the financial and all the business affairs of that city. And so they were important guys. And back then, a woman didn't just run and tell them guys anything. It was the guys that were the important ones, the guys that were doing all the business. And this is just another example of God saying, I'll do it my way. I don't have to do it your way. And so they went back and They normally would not listen to a woman, especially a woman with her sordid reputation until now. What caused them to listen to her now? Well, come see a man that told me everything I ever did. And verse 29, that was verse 29. And they, just like she, knew that Messiah is called Christ and would tell them all things. And here was the proof. I think the conversation probably went something like this. Yeah, what about all those husbands you had? And she said, yep, he told me all about them. And that guy you're living with now? Yep, he told me that he wasn't my husband. And guys, he told me some things about myself that even you don't know. Come see a man that told me all things that I ever did. Is this not the Christ? You go down to verse 39. And many of the Samaritans of that city believed on him for the saying of the woman, which testified, he told me all that I ever did. Later, it says, many more, I think verse 41, and many more believed because of his own word when Christ came in. But many believed because of the word of this woman. He told her everything that she ever did, and she told them all those things that they already even knew. So many of the Samaritans of that city believed on him, Jesus Christ, for the saying of the woman, which testified, he told me all that I ever did. Many more believed on Jesus after hearing his own words in verse 41. Now we know what the word must means and why he must go through Samaria. Must, had to. His primary goal was to save souls in Samaria, but he was going to use this woman to do it. I tell the kids in Sunday school. In fact, right now we're doing just a study on, and the kids are actually doing their own reports on women of the Bible. And, most of this book is about men. But I'm telling you what, there are so many wonderful women that God used in this Bible. Don't ever discount that. I'm telling you. I mean, you hear it from this pulpit all the time. Basically, we can't do anything without you women in this church. That's just how it is. I heard a preacher say one time, he said, when he gets to heaven, he said, I think I'll see a bunch of big name preachers in the back of the line. And be a bunch of older women with bloody knees because they were on their knees praying for the man of God or the people of God. They'll be up front. You women are important. And this woman is evidence that God uses all of us, uses you, uses guys too. And many were saved because of her testimony. So now what are we going to do with this? What's your testimony? And what's your testimony to be used for? To witness just like this lady did. To tell others. You don't have to tell them everything you did. Man, I'm telling you what, when I was out the nursing home just last week, I said, I wasn't saved till I was 26. There was a lot of meanness I did. And then I said, and you notice how I cleaned that up by just calling it meanness. Sure, man, I was a lost sinner. I'm glad I don't have to tell people everything I did. Now, I'm glad there's only one person who knows everything I did. Now, she knows a lot of the stuff I did. And hopefully she's not telling it all. But you know what? God saved me from all that. So glad he did. Wish I hadn't done a lot of that stuff, but I have, and God has allowed me to use some of that as an experience to help others that might be going down that path. So she's our example. If you're saved, you have a testimony of what Jesus Christ did for you. Are you telling anybody? You may not think you have a great testimony, but you were there when he did it. You can tell him that. I know he saved me. I was there. I remember where I was saved. I remember the day I was saved, the date I was saved. I've been saved 44 years this month, the 10th of this month. And remember where I was standing? Remember what I said? God just allowed me to retain that in my memory. It's not important that you remember the date and where you were and all that, but you know what? It's important that you remember that God saved you. And I've used this out at Golden Years. I I tell them this all the time. You're here, and I told them this last Sunday again, I tell them this a lot. You're here so these people here can care for you physically. This is your mission field. Maybe God has you here to care for them spiritually. Maybe they'll see you pray over your food. Maybe they'll see your Bible on your nightstand. You may be the only thing standing between them and eternity. I mean, we're only out there once a week, I think, standing and carrying out there a few more times. How many of them do not come to our church services? Lots. But they're souls that are going to eternity. Those people out there can tell them through some form or fashion of their testimony or witnessing to them. And so can we. If you have a job, you work with people. If you're retired, you have neighbors. So let's talk about Jesus. Tell him what he did for us. That's what somebody did for me. There was no lightning bolt. I wasn't like Paul. A big light come out of the sky and knocked me off my horse. God used somebody to get to me. Actually, several people, but I remember him. One guy's he's probably been gone 30 years now, but God used him. Let God use you. I always say that the biggest impediment to Steve getting God's blessings, and I'll say being used by God, is Steve. You know what? You just have to take that first step, and the rest become easier. Just have to open that mouth once. The rest of the words come easier. Will you do that? I love this example of this woman in here. I do. And this woman's not even named. Like I said in the Sunday school class, we're doing a lot of women of the Bible, and almost every one of them's named. This woman's not. And I think little Adea, she's going to do a report on Naaman's maid. No name. How important was she, though? Amen. I'm telling you, good stuff. All right. Thank you for listening to me. I don't have a missionary letter.